Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Movie Date with Rob and Matt, a podcast about people who enjoy talking about movies but do not want to be smug about it. I am Matt.
I'm Rob.
And I hope you are all doing well, safe and sound at home for wherever you are. I hope you're healthy and well. And
From the heart of the apocalypse, baby.
Yeah, we're
the zombie scourge has taken us all. The last free stronghold of man.
Yeah, and then of course we're going to podcast about it because that would make sense. That's something that would be done.
That's right.
Because we got to reach it out to the airwaves. If you're out there, you are the resistance.
My name is John Connor, the Christian Bale version.
My name is John Connor. We decided to. Whether wisely or not, break our own little quarantine, and because we're in a state that
no hugs, no handshakes, all safe over here.
We are at least 6 feet across.
Matt walked in. Matt walked in, and I immediately told him, "Don't you touch me, you son of a bitch."
Yeah, he had a a knife at me and was just like, "Get back,
get out and talk about this movie. Talk about these movies with me."
He's like, I want you in the studio, but stay behind the glass.
But are we talking about a movie today?
No, we're talking about
a genre.
We're talking. Well, this is an argument we could have. I don't see it as a genre. I see it as a medium in itself. We've talked about it a bit on and off in our discussions. We decided just to have a nice little bonus filler episode, which happens a lot in this medium.
Will be a bonus episode, not a full one, but there will be full ones as well.
And we're going to be talking about anime. We're going to talk about Japanese animation, Japanimation. It's something that's been very influential.
Definitely
for
not
us.
not a thing on the internet that gets controversial and hot-blooded and heated.
Hot-blooded, like
sub versus dubbed.
I'll
say it right now. Dubbed.
Well, we brought this up because we're both working our way through Netflix's Castlevania series, which though was American, Canadian, and generally European made, heavily influenced by anime.
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it an anime. That's how much.
Another conversation.
That's how much I don't care about the labels. But
well, then again, that of course breaks from the genre into the medium of itself.
Right.
And so we've been going through Castlevania. It's a series I started a long time ago, but now that it's just finished up with season 3, we are both not finished with it.
We're like both halfway through-ish.
But we figured since we're watching it and going through it, it'd be a good jumping off point to just do a nice episode about the subject of anime. Since it comes
I think we
up
both
a lot.
like enough anime where we could justify squeezing some content out.
And if you're a big film person, you probably like this, whether you get into the nitty gritty and you've got a Crunchyroll account and you're watching series, or you just know the big hitters
You've
like
watched
Miyazaki and Akira or Ghost in the Shell, and or know, we've talked about The Matrix, which has of course been very heavily inspired,
absolutely.
and
Speed Racer, which is
literally just adapted from one of the most famous anime of all time. But we want to start off talking about American anime and Castlevania to get started. Rob, did you ever play the games growing up?
I played none of the games. In fact, I know the games have gone back to PlayStation 1, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the series goes back to the NES, the Famicom.
And I remember the last one was I remember reading about Castlevania 2, and it was in a PlayStation 2 magazine about some of the best games that came out this year. And it was way up on there. And underneath, I remember they always put a funny comment at the end of the articles. It was a early 2000s magazine, and it was it's a fantastic game, but the main character looks like a woman, or they said something like that. And I'm pretty sure it was it was Alucard. Was the main character of a lot of those games.
That art style is very particular, and it is a woman that does the art style for all of the games, at least back to Symphony of the Night, which was the big one for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
I think for the Super Nintendo.
And it is very. I do remember thinking that. I was like, it is very effeminate, and I think on purpose.
Well, it's very. Yeah, it's got that gothic. It's very much like Vampire Hunter D, where everyone's very tall and narrow and sharp features, and
they're very lean.
Yeah, I'm. Let me pull up the.
And the fat people are overly fat. They're grotesquely
they're just
fat
creatures. The people are not people. It's very stylized, and I think that's something that why Castlevania works so well.
Yeah, but you played these games growing up.
Well, I've only played a few of them. It's a long series. My first introduction to it was Symphony of the Night, which is considered one of the better in the series. It's a part of a platforming genre that has just kind of become Metroidvania.
Yeah.
Because Metroid and Super Metroid and Metroid Prime, well, Metroid Prime first person, but they all came out of that thing where it's like, yes, it's a platformer. You go from level to level, but you will backtrack and you have to grab something to go back to this part. And usually there's lots of secrets and hidden things. What Castlevania did so well is it every area was so unique in Dracula's castle. All these monster designs were awesome. You know, you're running around. You could walk into another room and you're fighting Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
A bunch of frog creatures. You never know what reference is going to be made in the series and leading up to finally fighting Dracula. And I love games like that because I don't play a lot of them. I haven't played a lot of them, but they are kind of coming back into the fold because so many indie developers are doing throwback styles, and so platformers are on that. Like, I like beat 'em ups like Final Fight and Streets of Rage. I've been playing we've been borrowing a Switch, so I've been playing River City Girls, which is a new part of the River City Ransom or the River City series. And so you just go around beating people up in that classic sense, but it's all very anime style and very much like a shonen manga kind of.
So it's fair to say that you're inundated into what's the word? You're in the covenant of the anime.
I've always been, that style has always been something for me, and then Castlevania kind of has that. But I was trying to pull up the this could be some dead air while I'm looking this up, because the Castlevania series has been going on since 1986.
It's a very large cast of characters for sure.
Yes, and then probably the most recent popular one was Lords of Shadow, which was for PlayStation, produced by Kojima Productions.
Yeah.
So Hideo Kojima was involved in that.
I looked at his new one, and I was at Walmart.
Death Stranding?
I was walking through Target just like 4 hours ago, and I was looking in the TV section. I was like, oh, Hideo Kojima put out a new game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is his own independent. I've not played it. I have not really, but I'd like to, because I've been a big fan of him for a long time, and the Metal Gear Solid series.
Yes, those are probably one of the few that's one of the few game franchises I'm quite familiar with.
I mean, you could do a whole thing on that.
Yeah, and the movie that's been lounging in development hell for a long time.
And okay, so speaking of Kojima, not related, but Ayami Kojima is the one who did the art style for Castlevania, and for all the concept art and everything. So it's got that gothic, very pale, very Anne Rice-y kind of. You know, they have long, luxurious hair, and it reminds me of things like Vampire Hunter D and other stuff like that. And
I would say that's one of the first things about the show that struck me. It was like the first within the first episode, I was very taken aback by like, this artwork is not just like the character artwork, but the watercolor backgrounds and stuff. The stuff that everything looks real dreary. It looks like worse than a castle in Game of Thrones world. Like, it looks like when we go to the city of Grezit or whatever, I was like, I'm all about this. I'm all about some grime and some
gritty,
grunge.
it's grimy, jubilantly violent, which is a lot of fun.
I think that's Adi Shankar, who's also one of the producers on here.
Because it was originally supposed to be a film. This was supposed to be an animated.
Yeah, Warren Ellis had written scripts for this going back to 2009.
And that's
stuck in development hell for forever.
That's something to bring up. This is Warren Ellis, which if you know anything about Warren Ellis, I know him from Planetary, Transmetropolitan.
Writer of quite a few comic books that I like. One or two that I don't, but it's all right.
I enjoy Planetary. I like that take on the superhero, like a lot of time traveling and that, really interesting. Transmet is kind of a classic. I haven't really read much of it, but what I have I enjoy, with Spider Jerusalem and that whole thing. Very kind of, he's got a very gonzo, political, tongue-in-cheek kind of way of going about things, and you can definitely tell that in this series, because the banter between the characters is something you don't usually see in Japanese animation.
It really isn't.
Oh, and The Authority, Next Wave. You know, he's got a good sense of humor. He loves humor in his dramas.
Yeah. He's I feel like this show is a great blend of him and Adi Shankar. If you've seen his independently produced Power Rangers film that he did.
Oh, was that him?
The R-rated Power Rangers.
Oh, was that Adi Shankar? Okay. All right.
Which is when I saw the violence, I was like, I know you, Shankar. I know you're in there. Like within like the first episode when like Dracula besieges the city after like he's like, I gave you 1 year. And let's just talk about like the fact that the voice acting in this show is good. Spot on. Not since like the English version of Death Note.
Yeah.
Not the movie, but the voice actors for the anime of Death Note.
Right.
I was like, this is like, it's probably the best voice cast I've ever seen.
Well, that's something that should be the fact that this is much like Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is that of course these voice performances are so spot on is because the dialogue and everything is made for English
actors,
and they're not having to have that translation issue there or having to dub the voices. Richard Armitage does a great job as Trevor, and it's because he just spends the whole time just barely doing this, and it works so well for the character and for the dialogue because it's not translated over.
Yeah,
like
you can do things like that in a production like this.
Like in the
whereas
third season,
when you're dubbing an anime from overseas and you're getting a voice cast to do that, you can't add eccentricities like that. You kind of have to go with like, well, he's talking right here, so you need to.
You have to match the vocal tone. You have to match the intensity of the performance, and you have to match the dialogue that is being translated over from a language that is definitely not English.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that it is a strength of this show. Even when he's at like the first time we meet him and he's at that bar, he's drinking, he just mumbles stuff to himself. I don't think a Japanese production would do that. They would even think to write something.
Or that's a situation we're going back where we'll talk about the dubs versus subs, where you would want the performance from the original Japanese actors, because even if you don't know Japanese, their intensity matches that. Like I just watched a video of it was just brought up on my YouTube and I clicked it. It was the two voice actors for two of the major characters in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah.
And they did a live reading of one of the scenes the two characters are in. And they're just standing there, just look like they're doing a book reading. And they are matching the intensity of those characters, just the big screaming and without even doing anything.
Yeah.
That's how professional they are. It's like they could do all that vocal work just like sitting at a podium.
Yeah, but
and
they're balance like an egg on their hand the whole time.
And it's like that is only a level that you can get from that, and that shows how much discipline and how much of an art that is in that country.
Yeah.
While, here in America, like
they like their anime actors over there.
Oh yeah, they're big. I mean, and there's a lot of crossover in there too.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that took me initially when I first watched Castlevania first season a while back, was instantly I was like, oh, this has got that tongue-in-cheek, a lot more curse words, a lot more R-rated,
some very brutal, unpleasant violence at times.
Yeah.
But I was still like, I'm on
unpleasant.
board
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was for me too. But I was like, when a woman gets like ripped in half, I was like, whoa,
yeah,
you can't get that in Japan probably.
Well, maybe
you can.
You can. They don't do it like they did back in the 80s very much anymore with like Geromancer and like Violent Cop and all that. Like, it's just because animation has changed so much too. Yeah. Watching the new season, like even new people they've added, it's not really a spoiler,
Bill
Nye
is in there,
who plays Saint Germain. I wouldn't have even realized it's him at first, because he's using a vocal tone that's not, because usually when you get Bill Nye,
I knew it almost immediately. Yeah, I did. When he says when he goes up and he's asking the woman for like some fruit, and she's like, "You got money to pay for it or whatever," and I heard him, I was like, "Is that Bill Nye?" And then like I saw the credits, like it is Bill Nye.
Well, it's like I'm so used to him being more gravelly toned, and this he's got a higher pitch. He's a little more like, I haven't heard Bill Nye speak like that in a very long time, because usually he's a little more droll and a little more, he's usually playing older, and his performance of Saint Germain is so much more kind of lofty and so much more.
It is. He's kind of he's a lovable scoundrel. Yeah, kind of is what I've gotten so far. I'm about 6-7 episodes in.
Same. We're probably at the exact same point.
And I just got to the point where they let him into the priory to read the books, and I'm at the episode after that or whatever.
So you got to the end when Isaac is in the desert.
And he's talking to the devil, and it's telling him about what he was like as a human.
Yes.
And I fell asleep right when that was happening.
Dude, that's exactly what happened to me. So we left off at exactly
we're looking up at the same somewhere out there. Like we're looking at.
It was so good.
It was really atmospheric.
Yeah. And the good voice performance on the creature.
Yeah,
like,
as well.
Like him describing it.
So to go through some of the people, we have Richard Armitage as Trevor Belmont. We have Graham McTavish
playing
as Vet Dracula, who's really good.
Yeah, he's super good.
Or also known as Balin, or as Thorin and Dwalin from the Hobbit movies.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, we got a couple of hobbits in here.
Bill Nighy.
A couple of dwarves, rather.
Yeah. Bill Nighy's in it. Theo James plays Hector.
Plays Hector.
I can't remember the actor's name. There's two The guy who plays the captain of the ship is
Lance Riddick.
Yes. And he's the as I call him, the hotel manager from John Wick.
He's Charon from John Wick.
Yeah.
But he's also in The Wire, and he's in a couple of other things.
I didn't even recognize his voice.
Yeah, because he has a kind of a Jamaican
patois.
dialect.
Yeah.
He's got a patois in there.
And then there's the guy who plays Isaac, who I can't remember, but he's also really memorable. And I can't remember the lady who plays Sypha.
She's kind of new,
Yeah.
but she's got a Spanish dialect that's very natural and is very bubbly and fun. Adds a lot of lightness, particularly in the second season.
Yeah, not a lot of women actors till season 3 when you get Carmilla and her sisters.
And the sisters, who all do great performances all around. Speaking of celebrity people, the judge is voiced by Jason Isaacs.
Jason Isaacs, that's right.
Which is
Lucius
great.
Malfoy and the guy from The Patriot. What was his name? Tavington? Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, that Tavington's one of the greatest villains in cinema history.
But he's I remember that he was when I heard his voice, I was like, is that Admiral Zhao from Avatar? Because he's Admiral Zhao.
He is Admiral Zhao in Avatar.
The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
And I was like, of course, he hasn't done a lot of movies in a long time, but he's getting around for
Side note,
shows.
It's now on Netflix. If you haven't seen The Death of Stalin, Jason Isaacs is amazing in that movie. That's also one of my favorite movies of the last several years, my favorite comedies.
Yeah.
It's Armando Iannucci who did The Thick of It and In the Loop. He's a kind of political comedy guy. He also co-created or created Veep on HBO with Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Oh, nice.
This is his historical dark comedy about the Kremlin inner circle when Stalin dies and how they all manage it. And it's got like Steve Buscemi plays Khrushchev and Jeffrey Tambor's in it. All these actors are in it, and it's a slapdash political comedy that is also deeply troubling about the brutality of state.
Yeah.
Great. And Jason Isaacs plays this famous general, and he's so good in it.
All right, so let's trace the story a little bit of
Castlevania.
Yeah, of Castlevania.
So one thing that Warren Ellis does different, and this is very Warren Ellis, is it is very much...
He says religion is bullshit.
Yes, he is one of the most atheistic mothers. He's one of the most atheist mofos. He can't let it go. But what he does with Dracula, and the games do this a little bit, a lot of the time Dracula is dead depending on which game you're playing. And there's always someone trying to bring him back.
I wonder if that'll happen in like season 4. Maybe the end of this season. I don't even know.
Well, we'll see. Because I'd love more Graham McTavish. Because what he does is essentially this is a tragedy of Dracula. So essentially this is like 14.
No one yells like that guy does.
1450s or something like that.
It's
in Wallachia.
The early 1460s or 70s.
Yeah, and it's in Wallachia. So we're in the real world. We're in the Middle Ages, or in the 15th century. And Dracula is well known for what he is, but he is also a temperate man of science. He's a wise person. He's not a terror or a menace or really anything like that.
It's a weird blend of reality, anime, and like vampire lore and stuff. Like it's because they call him Vlad Tepes, which I think is his actual name, or Vlad Dracul Tepes.
The original, the original Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, was a Transylvania Romanian warlord, and
which is
all that.
Kind of what he is, but it's nobody. He's not ruling over a kingdom like the real one was, and people kind of know he's a vampire.
Well,
or they suspect.
We see a flashback where he definitely stakes a bunch of people.
Yeah,
like he.
Oh yeah, that's right. In season 2, so yeah, they definitely know he's like a monster,
right? But he is also an articulate.
He does impale people.
Yeah, he's an articulate gentleman who marries Lisa Tepes, who is they have a child together who is Adrian or Alucard, and they have a pretty decent sort of life as we see.
There's a great line in it where she goes, "If you're to love me as a man, you must live as a man," and she makes him wander the world, but he can't just like teleport. The way he has to walk like a man. He
has to do a journey to which understand knowledge and understand the human world. And which is ironic because what happens is Lisa is besieged by the evil church.
The clergy, yeah.
Matt Frewer playing the bishop in all of his vitriol and anger. Yeah. And of course, because she is a wise woman who practices science and natural medicines and things, they accuse her of witchcraft, which, I mean, essentially she is doing what witchcraft really was.
Yeah.
Which is just medication and herbal remedies and things like that.
Studying old cultures.
Right.
That were pagan, essentially.
And that doesn't go well, and she's burned at the stake.
Yeah. Also a very, a nice reverse allegory to Jesus. She says, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, which is what Jesus says to God. Which it's juxtaposing him as both, like, she's a holy martyr, and also, like, Vlad is... simultaneously Satan and the Holy Father
of some kind, yeah.
Which I appreciated.
Because there's a great line where she's like, she knows what they want to do with her, and she's like, don't do this, because if you do, something really terrible is going to happen, and he will kill you. And they're like, the devil has no. He's like, you're gonna. It's not the devil. You would wish it was the devil. Yeah. And Dracula begins his arch of revenge. He decides that humanity is overrated and they must all be punished.
Cancel him there.
Yeah, he's canceled. Humanity is over. And so he's like, I give you 1 year or I'm going to build my armies and I will besiege Wallachia to start.
And just to add insult to injury, they, instead of evacuating Wallachia, he gives people a year as a final kindness to get out of Wallachia. And instead they celebrate the day they burned his wife.
Right.
So yeah,
it's just like, he's like, all right. And he massacres all those people. And so enters Trevor Belmont, who is the last
of the House of Belmont.
Last of House Belmont, whose history from France and all over Europe has been monster hunters. They contain all the knowledge of monster hunters.
So are the Belmonts people in the games?
Yeah.
Are they featured in the games?
In fact, most of the major characters from every game are Belmonts or Belmont surrogates. So, like, the original is Simon Belmont, and then
who is mentioned in this game.
I don't know the timelines because the games have different timelines. Sometimes they are in like the 15th century, sometimes they're in the 1900s, sometimes they're in Victorian era, but a lot of them are grandchildren or descendants of the Belmonts. Like, so Trevor is a character in one of the Castlevanias, Castlevania 3, I think.
Cool.
Simon Belmont is kind of the main famous Belmont. He's the original one with the whip. Richter Belmont is one. Alucard is a major character in Symphony of the Night. So all of these characters are in it. Scythe
it's like a mishmash of the greatest hits of these games into a kind of new story.
What I read is Castlevania 3, The Curse of Dracula, which was the third in the NES series, is a major inspiration for the first season. And then the most famous, or Curse of Dracula, which was a recent PlayStation game, is for the latter two, because that one focuses on Isaac and Hector, who are characters in the game.
Yeah, I knew that as well.
And Saint Germain is a character. The sea captain is a reference to one of the other characters who's kind of a pirate. And of course, Dracula. What I'm looking forward to is if they bring death into it, because death, the Grim Reaper, has always been a pre-boss before Dracula in all the games. Death and Dracula have like this companionship, this friendship. And so I would love to see them bring death into it somehow.
So season 1 is just essentially a really loose get the band together season. Dracula is in it loosely at the very beginning, but really you follow Trevor Belmont and he goes to the city of Greshit and he basically he rescues Sypha, and then they find Alucard and they bring him back.
Is a speaker magician. They are wandering very kind of Roma coded European
sect of religious people. I don't know if they're Christians necessarily.
She says that they are bound to learn the ancient wisdoms and the ancient languages because God destroyed the Tower of Babel, and therefore they are kind of not on God's side. They're like, it's like, oh, God has multitudes. We don't like the way he did this, so we are kind of
But she's also weirdly critically of them because she doesn't think it's smart to not write everything down, which she thinks they should do.
Because they're completely oratory people. They don't write anything down. They are speakers. They pass down everything, and she is a magic user. And is bored and needs the thrill of adventure.
I like her. I like her character a lot.
Great character arc for her.
One of the things throughout the first season I was just driven by was how You remember in one of our last episodes, I talked about in the hands of a better filmmaker, this movie would blank, blank, blank. I think it was The Rise of Skywalker or whatever. The way it handles everything, this movie or this show is so over the top. And here's an example of I think it's over the top. Is like in episode 3 of the first season, Trevor is called to the church where we meet Matt Frewer's priest, the priest who killed Dracula again. He says, "You need to get out of Grudget, or I'm gonna." Or you will wish you hadn't. He kind of gives him the talking to. It's here. This is a perfect example. I can't even remember the lines, but I remember the scene because it has this blood red cast color palette to it, and there's this Gregorian chant is underneath it, and it's all billed as like everything is of the utmost importance, and it's real dark and heavy, but also like. A lot of the scenes in this are like that.
Yeah.
But also,
which is the aesthetic of the games. Like, it's very, very gothic, very, I always remember the themes from Castlevania. It's all this organ, dun, 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 and it has this very kind of big, classic, the towers of the castle and the monsters. So it's very callback to a Victorian era pulp.
But I could not love it anymore. if I really be honest.
It's funny that you mentioned how big it is. I feel like it could be more stylized. When you talk about in the hands of another director, if this was a Japanese production,
it would be
it would be way more slick and stylized. Like I can think of some directors.
I think it's just for what it is right now. I think it's just right.
Right.
And I think that like when examples of things like over the top would be like, an example of like when the priest is killed, like the priest tells the demons they corner him in a church, and he goes, God, and he goes, God doesn't like you or whatever, and he goes, but
there's no God here.
But he says like, but we love you. Because we wouldn't be here without you. Now, if a normal director did that here, like, the animation director, he would just be like, the demons knock down the church. He's on one side, and whether they talk, and then he kills him.
Right.
But like this one is like, there's a bunch of shadow in the background, and you just see like the eyes, and like you see like I think the big hulking lieutenant creature, like like you see it like lift him up, and the blood drips down his foot, and that to me is very stylized.
It is.
Even if it's very like subdued,
right? Because the animation is obviously on a level and on a budget because it's not done by a Japanese studio.
Yeah. And so let's move on to, this is where I think the show got, like, I liked the first season and it was enough to get me to watch the second season. The second season is where I think it goes to like next level stuff.
Yes, because the first season is only 4 episodes. I think what they were doing was they were just sort of testing a line.
Testing the waters.
And seeing like, is this something worth putting money into?
Yeah.
Because it's a big budget production.
Because I was so angry when it was over. Yeah. I was like, 4 episodes?
Well,
bullshit.
And I also felt very much like, where's the Castlevania-ing?
Yeah, where's
I
the
want to get
Dracula?
in this castle. I want to see all these monsters. That's kind of a little bit of not a super disappointment because what they do instead is quite good.
Yeah.
But I still have that argument about I would love to see more castle going.
Yeah.
That's what the game is.
I think season 2
amps that up a little bit, but
yeah.
it's also it's a training montage sort of to get up to the point.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more cool monsters and you get the idea of the Forge Masters.
So let's trace through season 2 real quick. One of the things I really liked, you can tell me if you liked it, the generals.
Yeah. I wish they had more personality other than just aesthetic.
Peter Stormare
as Godbrand. He's just a bitchy Viking.
Pretty great. My favorite part.
His voice acting is so bizarre. He's just like, that's what they think.
He's a personality.
I built boats out of anything.
I always remember, and he goes, bigot. He calls the guy a bigot for like, and he goes, you just take a boat. And he goes like, I was like, we're sailors, we're Vikings, bigot or whatever.
We make everything out of boats.
And he, I'll always remember him as the devil in Constantine.
That's
my favorite.
Such a good performance.
Peter
Stormare has a legendary career,
and
he'll also do
a huge voice actor. He was in like Icewind Dale 1 or Icewind Dale 2 and stuff. Like he gets around.
Yeah,
that dude.
Well, he's got a very particular Scandinavian voice that people want to use.
Yeah. And I liked him, and I liked the personality. I wish more of them had personality like him, not like they were goofy or whatever, but like you get to know him. Carmilla
is kind of the arch enemy. She's the one who comes in. Also a great performance because she balances coolness with cruelty so well. And this is something I did like about season 2 is with the generals there, it almost becomes a political situation. It's a military story. And because Dracula's just like, genocide, I want them all dead. I want them all dead. And everyone's just like, all right, boss.
But how? But like, and what are we gonna eat? And like, you get all these questions. And
you see the courtroom politics, not the courtroom, but the court intrigue for these vampires, because they have reasons, they have things they want. They don't want to eat deer all the time. They want meat.
Yeah, and there's a really gruesome scene where Godbrand takes them on a hunt, and they
slaughter this village.
And it really changes the way I see him, because I see him as a funny buffoon, and then that happens, and I'm like,
well, you also get those flashbacks of him taking on that army, and he's just brutal.
Yeah, he's killing the Crusaders or whatever. Yeah, it's pretty good. But I love that when Godbrand comes up and like kind of confronts Dracula's having none of it.
That monologue he gives to him.
Tiny little Godbrand.
You little vampire. I was just like, okay, that's good. Yeah. That's good. That's a great monologue.
I love that in the first season, Graham McTavish as Dracula is like, he's all fire and fury. Mm-hmm. But I actually really liked how in the second season, he's very diminished, and he does want them dead, but he's almost like, don't ask me how. Don't give me details. Just get him, kill him.
I would love to see interviews with McTavish about his performance, because there's so much under it. There's so much subtext.
Yes.
He provides so much for just a figure that's animated, in terms of, like, he realizes almost, and he's so morose over the idea that it's like, I know my plan is flawed, and I don't necessarily want to do it, but it has to be done for the justice of it. Yeah.
And there's a part where he says, no, I think he does want to do it, but there's a part where it's right before, or it's right after, or before, it's kind of in the middle where you see that raid where those merchants of that city disrespected him. So he took them all out and he killed them. Just them. He didn't kill everybody, but he just killed them. And he said, back in my younger days, I would have stormed the walls and I would have bathed in their entrails. He says like some really like gruesome stuff. And he goes, but now.
Which is also a good monologue.
Yeah. And he goes, I'm just tired. Yeah. And I really liked that side of him, because like I said, Graham McTavish, no one yells like him. But I found his reluctance and his just exhaustion, and his dealings with Hector and Isaac is where you see a lot of that. Yes. Was really good.
And they're the three of them going back and forth in this relationship they have is so interesting as well. And when that splits.
Yeah, for the people not listening, Dracula brings in generals to adjudicate his war, and Dracula's two right-hand men are two humans named Hector and Isaac, and they're forge masters, and their jobs are to take dead bodies and they turn them into demons and creatures of the night to serve in Dracula's army.
Are taken over by demons from hell to do his bidding.
Yeah.
And that's where you get all the monsters from.
Yeah. And cool creature designs a lot of times too.
Some get a little boring, some get a little more interesting.
Some are pretty generic, but
after playing the games, I want more of the because you can go through and go on like Castlevania wiki and look at all the different creature designs on there just from the pixel art. Yeah. And I'm like, I want that. I want that. I don't want another jowly werewolf. But later on, you get some
cool ones, especially when they attack the Belmont place.
Yeah.
I thought those are some really cool ones.
And they get some great fight scenes. That's something we'll talk about by itself, is just the fight animation. Yeah, it's so good.
Up until the last episode of the first season, I was like, the action's fine. I'm kind of just watching it for the atmosphere.
Right.
But then when Alucard comes out and him and Trevor have the fight, I was like, this is what I'm here for, baby.
When I saw the Alucard Trevor fight, I was
like, ridiculously long sword, and
like he just kind of hovers.
Yeah.
It's so dope.
Very like, I remember I was watching it reminded me of I was watching a commentary from a channel. They were watching Man of Steel, and there's a part where Superman is hovering and the tanks are shooting up at him, and the guy says, "Don't fuck with a guy who hovers like that. It's super intimidating." And I was thinking of the exact same thing with Alucard. There's a part where he uses his little black and red super speed, and he zooms over and like knocks Trevor off of his balance or whatever, and I was like, that was dope.
Yeah, and it's a great balance of pure force and elegance and poise.
Yeah,
like he's a kind of a fencer.
Yeah, and his sword is like twice as long as it should be, or something.
He's got a little bit of a Sephiroth thing going on of the long hair, but he's also great character.
And I will also say, we should talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, Alucard is especially what's leading up in the third season. Obviously, we haven't finished it, but
his voice acting as well. It's a great mixture of like soft-spoken cold loner and like some funny quick wit that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I'm reminded a little bit of. Did you ever see Samurai Champloo?
Yes, I have seen Samurai Champloo.
He's
the Jin, and the other guy is the crazy man.
Is Jigen? Yeah, not Jigen. It's a mix of those two characters. Like Trevor is definitely, I think it is Jigen, and the other guy, and
Alucard would be like Jin, the guy with the glasses. I know who you're talking about.
And because their dialogue and back and forth is like he's the stoic, thoughtful, but he shows humanity
which
well.
is my favorite part. Yeah. Exactly,
because his isolation and loneliness.
In fact, there was a part that I said there's a part that moved me to tears. Is that of course at the end we get these guys and they all go up and they storm Dracula's castle and they find a way to hijack it and bring it to them.
Right, because Dracula's castle has
teleports.
Magic mechanisms that are able to send it wherever it wants to go, and that's a big part of the second season plot is Dracula managing with his closest crew about where they need to invade.
Yeah.
And eventually they're like, we need to go to Brayla, we need to go to the port city, but really that's Carmilla's plan to overthrow him.
Which I never really fully got her plan. I think her plan is silly and kind of short-sighted.
Well, that's something even the sisters bring up is she's all like fire and passion, but
she doesn't always think
guidance.
It through.
Yeah. Because what they want to do is cordon off essentially all of Eastern Europe into a pen to eat humans for the rest of their lives. And so that because
human farms.
Yeah, human farms.
Things to eat.
Right.
At the end of the fight with Dracula, or not the end of the fight, after they defeat, we'll circle back to the fight itself because I want to talk about it because it's really dope. But after the fight, they've won and Trevor leaves and Alucard is stuck alone in this castle and he goes up to his old room.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where you see him as a boy and his mom and he just starts to cry. And it was, I teared up a lot. Like I wiped away a bunch of tears. And I was like, that is heartbreaking because you really feel like that's the only time he actually grieves for his mom because the rest of it, he's all like, I'm on a mission.
Yeah.
But up in that moment, I was like, you feel his tragedy and his isolation because he's without his mother and his father. And
because he's the one who slays Dracula. He's the one who slays his own father.
I would argue that it's
a suicide, essentially. He allows him to.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's what I liked is I almost didn't even know like how could you defeat Dracula and make it satisfactory? Like, did they just beat him? Because like just beating him, if Alucard is powerful, Dracula would have to just be more powerful, and he is, which is why I like
because they have a brawl until they get up in the room, and Dracula has this moment like, oh my god, I'm killing our son.
There's a line where he says Lisa, and he goes, our baby boy, like your last gift to me, and I'm killing him. And I was like, it's surprisingly emotional, and I expected like the emotional scene for Alucard to be when he kills his father, but I think when they save it, there's what's the term? They let it breathe. Yeah. They let it linger for like a good 20 minutes until the last episode, and he just sits down and he cries, and it's like real. What's the word? Agony.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
It's deep sorrow. It's like he can't come to peace with the tragedy of it until he solves that mental problem, which is the death of his own father. And then when it's all said and done and he's alone in that castle, it hits him.
Yeah.
And you feel it because it's been built up so well because they have a lot of talk about their past. Like Trevor is the exact opposite where he's bottling it all in because like my family was killed and I've been an orphan since I was like 13. Yeah. And all the knowledge of being a monster hunter and everything, I never gave a shit and I don't want to until it becomes something he has to do.
Yeah. And I liked the fact that him and Alucard never have a verbal coming to terms, but what they do have is like Trevor gives him the Belmont hold, or what's left of it, I guess.
That was so good.
Yeah.
That was so good. Because he's like, I give you as above, so below. You have both the knowledge of Dracula's ages, and you have the ages of my family. It's my gift to you because I don't want it.
And I was struggling with Alucard in season 3 because it seems like he has less to do so far, but I do like that. The two hunters come and find him.
The two Japanese former slaves of one of
Dracula's generals who we see. The sort of kimono wearing, not racial stereotype at all.
Great, but still
terrifying.
Cool design.
Yeah.
Like these guys have really cool design. A lot of them get wiped out in the last episode, either at Brayla because they bring the priest back to turn the water, which is really slick move. That's kind of a Game of Thrones move, right?
Yeah, they turn the water into holy water.
The holy water. So
but the priest is an undead demon possessed.
But he burns.
That doesn't feel like it counts.
He burns up into it as well. So yeah.
And it's the same priest that murdered Dracula's wife, which I also thought was good.
They've had his corpse for a while now, and they just do that.
But yeah, so that they come and find Alucard to make sure she can't come back, and I think ultimately to set their. I'm pretty sure she's dead, but if she's not, to rid the rest of their country of vampires or whatever. And Alucard seems to take a liking to them,
and they
very quickly. They start developing some
bond.
Friendship coming
because he's been.
Do you want these?
What are those?
I don't want to say it because
Taquitos. Sure, I'll take one. Sure, thank you, sweetie.
Taquitos.
And I actually really liked it. It's weird seeing Alucard so happy at times.
Yeah, well, it shows a great character development for him because at the beginning of the season, he's just alone in this giant castle, and he's talking to two plush dolls of Sypha and Trevor.
I laughed
and
so hard at
he's
that.
just like, I'm going fucking crazy.
He
I'm
does
losing my mind.
He does a funny impression of both of them, like
He's
the voice.
Oh, I'm just a drunken piece of shit, and I don't know what to think.
I'll stick my dick in any hole in the ground. And he goes, I'm better than everybody, and I think that
I'm the smartest, and he's just like, I really am.
I got to get out of here. But I like that he's sort of. I think that works for him though. The silent. He bears his sort of. His cross and like silent dignity kind of thing.
Well, he's such a.
I do hope we get more action with him though.
Yeah,
I want to see some
because it is kind of like in the third season. It's broken up into many different arcs now. So they kind of put Alucard and the two of them in the back burner while Trevor and Sypha are now a couple. And now they're
which I very much approve of.
I love it. I love it. There's no will they won't they. They did. They will. Yeah. And they love it.
That's what I'm going to say right now. I'm eating something. Sorry, listeners. A Japanese anime would drag that out for 9 seasons.
Yeah, no.
And they're like,
you can count the number of protagonists in a series that have a relationship in like one hand.
But I like the fact that she likes him and she's not very ambiguous about it, and he likes her. Sort of roughly begrudgingly, but he knows that he likes her and he's okay with it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they don't gild the lily. They let them just fall in love with each other.
Like after the extreme circumstances, she realizes she loves adventure and he realizes he loves her loving adventure.
Yeah.
And they become a team and they talk about their team. It's very cute. It's very enjoyable. And so they are on a mystery in this village in Lindenhurst.
Lindenfield, I want to say.
Where the judge is, and he's like, I'm trying to keep everything in there. They were attacked one time, and this very Lovecraftian-looking monster fell. They called them night creatures.
Yeah,
fell into beasties.
Yeah.
Fell into the church, and something happened in there.
And now the people of the church like worship it and wear its armband, and they which turns
out to be like the symbol for hell.
Yeah.
Like they are worshipers of hell itself.
And I like the fact that when you go in the church, one, it's real gross. And they seem to be deeply moved by Dracula's plight. And there's even a part where it's between, I think the guy's name is Prior Sala and Bill Nighy's character, Saint Germain, where he says, should I point out that your wall hanging is upside down.
It's the
and
Jesus
says,
on the crucifix.
And he goes, yeah, we don't worry about that much anymore. He goes, it actually might be pointing the right way right now. And I was like, oh, interesting. I want to know what the mystery is. And I think we're going to get it. We get some references like the infinite corridor or whatever. That definitely has.
Did you get to that scene with Saint Germain?
Well, he tumbles through the time hole or whatever.
That was very Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
That was very cool. And also great performance from Bill Nighy in that because he's looking for somebody.
Yeah.
Who's been lost to time. Because we see like aliens in the future and like
spaceships.
The moon has been shattered, so we get these glimpses of
potential futures or whatever.
It's very weird. It's very interesting.
Yeah. But anything more you want to talk about? Castlevania. I mean, I'm 100% on board with this, and I think it's probably the best anime I've seen in a very long time. Whether or not you agree that it's an anime can be left up to. Discussion, but
that's what we'll get to at our second half of this.
Yeah.
Also, the guy who plays Sala, the priest, is Naveed Nagaban, who is an Iranian actor. He's been in obviously Homeland 24, but he plays Amal Farouk or the Shadow King in FX's Legion. which is one of my favorite wackadoo shows that's come out recently.
I've never seen it. I need to. I know it's great, but I need to.
Legion is something else. He's great in it.
All right.
That show is the boldest thing a Marvel property has ever done.
Yeah.
Ever done.
From what I understand, he's a guy with multiple personalities, and they all have a different superpower.
Oh, he's an entity. He just has different. He's a mutant, and he's like an entity. And
he's supposed to be
forms.
Professor X's brother. Is the comic book lore? I believe Legion is his brother, isn't it?
No, it's his son.
Is his? Or yeah, his son.
The main character played by a British actor I don't remember who's so good in it. Aubrey Plaza also is in it, and she's incredible. He's the son of Professor Xavier. He's the illegitimate son, David.
Yeah. Quick little aside before we get back to this: is that ever mentioned in the show?
They mention it, but you don't see Professor X played by anybody.
Okay,
but it is mentioned several times.
Boo! Bring it in. Bring James McAvoy in. But whatever.
That'll be fine. I think that right now Marvel in general just doesn't know how to touch this series because it is so experimental. Yeah, just let it be.
Just like their Deadpool. Let them keep doing Deadpool. It doesn't have to tie to anything. Just let them keep doing it. Anyway, is it anime? Is it not anime? Let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about our favorite animes.
Okay. So I've had this discussion before. This is our second act. So talking about this, we also bring up something like Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Versus anime versus inspired by anime. Because if you read up about the people who created Avatar, if you read up about the people who created Castlevania,
Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko.
I remember,
creators.
They would say they were inspired by.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear in
because
several
it's
episodes.
an aesthetic. You know, you get the typical, the way the eyes are drawn, the way the character designs is, the Asian influence is all very much. You get that also with Teen Titans is very anime inspired as well. Yeah. It all is very manga and anime, particularly shonen anime. Yeah. Which I
would argue that Last Airbender is much more overt about it. Whereas Teen Titans, it's almost like, oh, that's a little anime homage right there.
Teen Titans was a little more kind of popped up by it, but it still is very much what it is. Because even the city that they're in is very Japanese, very Electric City kind of vibe to it. So it definitely, and the opening theme was by a J-pop band as well. Or a J-rock band.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But
then there's like facial expressions in Avatar. We're like, oh, that's an anime expression.
But even then, I think they tone it down a little more for it. While Castlevania is a lot more of that mature, sharp-angled, what they would call scening anime style.
Yeah, and I would argue that like this is just even more of that.
Right.
This is like as close to an actual anime look as any American-made production is.
I would agree.
It is almost indistinguishable artistically.
Aside from like certain kind of jaggedy, the flow of some of the character motions can be a little kind of panel-y, and that's very different from what you'd find in a Japanese studio. But yes, it is the closest parallel to a professional Japanese animation
that I've ever seen
production. Yeah. So I don't consider anime a genre. Mm-hmm. I consider it either a style, an aesthetic, or just a straight up medium in animation. And as because anime consists of many different genres, sometimes some that obviously very influentially cross over with each other. A lot of great science fantasy outside of Star Wars and Star Trek not Star Trek really, come from anime.
Yeah.
Entire genres were created out of that, not just anime, but out of, Japanese productions in general, because it is so multifaceted and so multi-dimensional. It is a style in itself of animation that also has completely different techniques.
Yeah.
Because the same would be said in French animation, in classic Soviet animation.
There are Japanese animation productions. Like if anime is just, it's cartoons from Japan, there are Japanese productions that I would not say look colloquially like anime.
Yeah,
that you'll see and you'll be like, that doesn't look like anime.
There's a lot of things
if
that
it's
look
just
very different.
ethnic, then that's not enough to really define it.
Well, and it also should be brought up that a lot of 90s cartoons, particularly Warner Brothers cartoons like Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, and things like that, a lot of their episodes were created in Japanese studios, like TMS and other stuff like that, who were putting out popular series were done in Japanese studios. Transformers, of course. Even like Hanna-Barbera productions
Probably
were coming out of that.
Early Voltron, I bet.
Well, Voltron is...
Oh, yeah, it just is anime.
Yeah, because you get stuff like, obviously, you get stuff like Robotech, which was just like Macross and Southern Cross and all these other series molded together into this Frankenstein creature of Japanese animation.
Is this anime then?
No.
No.
Castlevania is not an anime. It is an anime-inspired action horror.
What do you think the dividing line is in your mind?
It is, I think it is national. I think it is the production company. I think even like I said, even the creators themselves would say, I didn't create an anime series. I created an anime-inspired series. I think that it is defined by it coming from Japan. Because even things that come out of South Korea, which South Korea has a lot of webcomics and everything that are starting to get popular. There's actually a very popular one called Tower of God that is Korean produced, that came out of this new genre this new style and genre called webtoons, which are essentially independently produced webcomics and manga series. And this is South Korean series. It just got a fully developed animated series released on Crunchyroll. Yeah, and it's been very popular, but it's not Japanese.
And
it's
also,
Korean.
The Last Airbender has a lot of Korean production. Like if you look through the credits, there's a lot of just like
in-house Korean animators and everything. So, but no one would call the Korean work anime. They'd have a different term for it. Right. And there's even a different term for manga that comes out of Korea as well, and the same in China or any other location. And so anime is so specific to Japan.
Yeah, and it cannot be anime, and I could still I would say as far as Castlevania or Last Airbender, I might like those shows better than most animes that I
When I was growing up and I was watching The Last Airbender, I was like, this is doing things for me that a lot of other shonen style, and when I say shonen is your standard there's two big genres of young readers, manga and anime. Yeah. Shonen means boy in Japanese, and it literally is your DBZ,
Dragon
One
Ball Z.
Piece, Bleach, My Hero Academia, fighting, learning about ourselves, stylized,
self-empowerment, training, lots of training,
disciplining yourself, and shoujo.
It's amazing that the Japanese culture aren't just jacked, because they're pumped full of this propaganda of training. But it's anyway.
Yeah, we don't train enough.
And then the girl would be like Sailor Moon,
right? It's softer. But a lot of it is is romantic,
smoother lines,
fantasy, but also does not toe the line of traditional female roles. Like, these are heroines. Sailor Moon, of course, is full of warriors who are essentially like intergalactic cops. Cardcaptor Sakura is about a young girl who commands these
I remember that
world-ending powers through the tarot cards.
Remember that awesome R&B intro? Anyway,
there's the translation there. Yeah, so these two styles are very particular, and then seinen is essentially everything else that's more mature, where you deal with mafia, science fiction, stuff that's a little more grittier, stuff that's a little more real.
Maybe like Cowboy Bebop.
Bebop's is a classic seinen, yeah.
So I would say, given a lot of those, I might like The Last Airbender. Might be one of my favorite animated shows of all time. Maybe the one, because it is it's deep in its mythos. Mm-hmm. The more you learn about it, and if you watch Legend of Korra, it's a great accompanying piece. Not as good, but it's still.
But I like the style.
Yeah, and I love
like that,
and I love the mythology.
Yeah, and I love that era, that kind of sort of steampunk.
But kind of swords and shields.
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah,
that's something they just did the Final Fantasy VII remake, and one of the things that I love about that game, that I grew up on that game, is that balance between future modern and classic fantasy. Yeah. So we've got guards with machine guns and cyber helmets, but Cloud uses a big old sword. Don't worry about it.
And I definitely feel like that show. I've watched. There was a while where I think I've watched DBZ all the way through 30, 40
and
times.
Does that count with also Super, GT?
I've never watched Dragon Ball, Kai, or Super, because to me,
Kai is DBZ.
It's just edited. And
yeah, GT was kind of the controversial sequel, and then Super has been very well responded.
It can be well responded. To me, it's all downhill after Z, baby.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because there's only so many times you can train and fight another person who's stronger than you, and then train and get stronger and then beat them.
You can only
after
go
a
so
while.
far.
After a while, I stopped caring.
Well, that's one of the things about Super, because I love the original Dragon Ball. When that first started airing, I was like, oh, this is like an adventure.
Yeah.
This is an adventure
It doesn't
series. It's a little more irreverent. It's a little more raw.
And those anime themes aren't in there as deep. There is like you have to learn the Kamehameha, but it's not like you have to go to this planet and train at harder gravity to come back and be like...
That hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah.
Like the original Toriyama Dragon Ball is much more of a goofy, a goofy, irreverent action adventure series.
It fits a lot more along something like One Piece than it would anything else.
Right.
And I would say that I like
Dragon Ball is in a world of its own. Like it's there's really not
just
many
talking
other...
animal presidents.
Right.
In Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, don't worry
nobody
about
ever brings that up.
Yeah,
there's still dinosaurs.
No that there's like dog cops and things.
There's spirit worlds and there's alien planets. Like it's a weird, like I always say, if they ever make a Dragon Ball Z movie, you'd have to pick one.
Yeah.
I don't think you could do it like
yeah,
I think the best way to do
Dragon
is
Ball Evolution.
Yeah.
Nope.
Oh God, we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. But I think the last Airbender, I might like it more at the end of the day.
I think so too.
Better characters and
its flow is really
the mythology of the ancient avatars and like even episodes of like Ko the Face Stealer when you never meet him again, but you know there's history there.
Or the giant owl that's in the library.
Yes.
Like there are all these little adventures that matter.
Or Uncle. And or like the fact that there's an episode where Aang first goes to the spirit world, the Heibai spirit, and Roku's dragon comes and gets him to tell him you need to go to this island to meet Roku so he can tell you about the comet, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
That episode, Uncle was captured by earthbenders. And
Uncle Iroh.
Yeah, Uncle Iroh. And you see Aang in the spirit world on the spirit dragon flying, and Uncle, nobody else, sees him. And that's not something you ever understand until Legend of Korra, where Uncle now lives in the spirit world. There's like such a dent. It's like Lord of the Rings-ish, and the breadth, like how broad its mythology is.
So fully realized and so fully written and so understood. In fact, and balancing it so that it still is accessible to young viewers
and yet so serious,
so mature and so thoughtful, and the story is told so well.
Yeah, season 1 of Legend of Korra ends in a murder-suicide.
Yeah,
like that's and like there's the characters here played by Henry Rollins suffocates a woman to death. Like it doesn't pull its punches, and I like that about it. In the same way that Dragon Ball Z is fun until Android 20 puts his hand through Yamcha or something, which is horrifying as a kid.
Yeah. But Yamcha always gets killed.
Yeah, but it was
Krillin.
But it was how gruesome that show could be at times.
Well, it's like I remember like we would always talk about the episode at playgrounds. Like while I was having, I was like, oh my god, Krillin just died in the last episode. Like, what's Goku gonna do?
And I think that
which is just a brilliant way to get you back in.
I think somewhere in the Majin Buu saga, I started going, it's not for me anymore. Like I remember watching.
My taste in anime kind of was changing at that point anyway, mostly due to the influence of Adult Swim.
After like the first Super Saiyan, when he turns Super Saiyan, is like only one in every million Saiyans can be this, and then Super Saiyan 2 is a new thing.
Pretty hair.
Yeah, and then like by the time we get to Super, like he's literally a god. Like what's the next thing he fights? The creator of the universe, and he literally punches the universe out of existence to create a new one. I'm like,
I mean, he's fighting gods at some point.
Yeah, and at some point I'm just like,
that's one thing about Super that looks interesting to me is there's a character Jiren, because it's literally the tournament of tournaments. Like if you fail in this tournament, they just destroy your universe, like your existence entirely. And Jiren is essentially Batman. Like he's not a bad guy. He is literally probably a better person than Goku is, but he is the only person who can match Goku because he's the antagonist. And that's I'm like, I kind of want to check that out. That sound looks interesting because Jiren himself is a really cool character, though I know very little about it. I think around that time I started sort of tapering out of it because I discovered other shonen series like Yu Yu Hakusho, which is one I really love and still stands up very well.
It's not unlike Dragon Ball Z in the sense that the themes are almost the same.
Everything leads to a
tournament. You train
and
you learn a new technique, and then you fight a guy, and then the guy's stronger than you thought, and you have to get stronger. Like it's the same thing.
One of the best, which is Toguro, who's just terrifying villain.
Yeah, and I remember there was one line from Yu Yu Hakusho that I'll never remember. And it's after he fights Toguro in that tournament. Like, it's the final fight between him and, like, I actually lied about how strong I was. My 100% was actually only 85, and I'm even strong. And he still kicks his ass or whatever at the end. And I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is the translation of, like, an English production will give you dialogue and stories and characters that I just think will go deeper.
And of course, that's because we're native English speakers.
Yeah, which is not to say that there's not anime shows that I think do carve out great characters. Full Metal Alchemist, I think, is a great show that carves out great characters. Although there is that weird subplot with the prince from the other land who gets fused to greed and stuff. That's one of the things where me and my cousin talked about which is better, Full Metal Alchemist or Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
It's Brotherhood. Dude.
I say it's Alchemist.
It's Brotherhood.
I say it's more streamlined. The horror elements are way harder.
It's the same with Hellsing or Hellsing Ultimate, where it's like the original Hellsing anime was very influential for a lot of people, but it just kind of goes in its own direction, while Hellsing Ultimate is so much more faithful to the manga, and therefore is more gothic, more stylized, and way more violent.
Yeah, and I think that some of the bigness of Brotherhood just made me kind of chuckle to myself. Like, we're turning the whole world into a Philosopher's Stone, and there's a giant moon creature, and I was like, this is insane. Whereas the first one, I felt stayed with the characters and the loss of their mother and how painful that was. And then at the end, when they have to defeat the or when they have to defuse the every time someone tried to bring someone back to life, they created a Philosopher's Stone, and I liked how that unfolded as well. And you get to see whereas Lust is killed by Mustang and Alchemist just real quick. He just keeps frying her over and over again until she's a pile of ash. Whereas in the original one, or in Brotherhood, I think Scar's brother tried to bring someone back to life and created Lust, if I'm not mistaken. I get all the homunculi mixed up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot I don't remember.
Yeah, but I think that that's an example of an anime to me. That's one of my favorites. Where the characters are great. It's not goofy. It is goofy. It's funny, but it's never goofy. And the horror elements of it are genuinely
surprising and shocking.
Yeah.
And well, that's a good question. There is because anime as itself is properly shaded as a very nerdy, very specific subculture. Sometimes a subculture way more embarrassing than and not mainstream. It's getting more mainstream in America, but it comes to watch the development from all the way in the 80s and 90s, where it's guys at conventions bootlegging, home subtitled tapes, to Toonami in the late 2000s,
and now
introduces everything to
Netflix.
Yeah, it's
everywhere.
Netflix. And a show like Castlevania can be popular, and Netflix can be we are premiering anime series, and that's a big deal. And it's successful and it's popular.
I think they just announced, I'm going to bring it because everything always turns back to Zack Snyder. He is doing a anime show based around the Norse gods called Ragnarok. I think I heard that. Yeah, he just got Netflix just announced they were partnering. I don't know if he's doing it or if he's just one of the creative directors involved.
Because I also heard that J.J. Abrams for HBO Max is doing Justice League Dark.
Yeah, I don't know if it's animated or if it's a show.
It's probably going to be a live action show.
Yeah,
cool. That's going to be cool. I hope.
Yeah. I hope to see it. I want
my girl
Constantine,
Zatanna,
and I want Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
everything else. I want
Zatanna. I want a good Zatanna. She's one of my favorite characters.
I think that anime is. Do you use last thing to wrap it up? Is Castlevania aping the culture of anime, or is it like a celebration,
like a cultural appropriation?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's. I think because it is so in its own world, it knows its area. It is just a style, it is aping a style, but it's doing it all in itself. It's not trying to be something it isn't. No, I don't. I think there's an argument to be said about that, but I think they're not setting it in Japan. It's
because it's not set in Japan.
No, it's.
Why would Dracula be set in Japan?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things why Castlevania was easy to do, is because Castlevania, despite it being a Konami production, a Japanese production from the beginning, it's all set in Western canon.
Yeah,
and inspired by Western canon. It is created from the love of the original Bram Stoker, but also Hammer horror, pulp from the 60s. All the creators were very inspired by horror film, horror literature, which all of that came out of the West.
Yeah.
And all of that was very Western influence. They love it. And they just added that stylized thing that comes from Japanese pop culture that makes it work.
Yeah. Agree with that.
And now I want to finish it off with something else.
Oh, go ahead. Floor's yours.
Let's talk about something any series we'd like to recommend, anything we've been watching lately. I feel like this conversation could have gone longer, but we're kind of wrapping it down because I've got a couple of things I've been watching.
I can edit some stuff out. I have a couple of my favorite animes that I remember watching growing up, and one that I wish would be made into. We'll end it with. After we talk about some of our favorite, talk about one you think should be a live action movie, because I have a good one that I know you're going to agree with.
None.
One that I remember watching and liking, being so captivated by, was Wolf's Rain back in the day.
Yeah,
I never finished it, but I remember
that
loving.
Style reminds me of Castlevania.
Yes,
because it's
big
it's very
backgrounds
realistic.
and
It's very sharp. It doesn't go for crazy aesthetic.
Yeah. One of my favorite animes I remember liking, I've watched this dozens of times. It still holds up, even though some of the dialogue is stilted and weird. It's still an entertaining. It's also the same character, the same guy who voices the character in Bleach. Trigun.
Trigun's great.
Fantastic series.
Great. That's Johnny Bosch.
Between that and Rurouni Kenshin for peace-loving killer who only wears red, I think Vash the Stampede takes it out.
Yeah.
I think that.
I think you could do Trigun in the West because it's Western inspired. Literally, it's a Western.
Well, you could. That's a good honorable mention for would make a great movie. It's like cyberpunk. Like steampunk, sci-fi future, aliens. They're actually plant people.
I've been going through the Mad Max films recently. Get George Miller on that.
Oh yeah, man, absolutely.
It'd be tight.
It'd be great. What are some other ones that I remember watching and liking? Of course, Full Metal Alchemist, Naruto. I haven't finished it yet, but I think that is still. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I just
it is
couldn't
worth
get into it. But that's where I bring up something like My Hero Academia. That's kind of, to me, is a series that. Its popularity right now is so deserved because it has such an enjoyable style. It takes the shonen tournament fighter thing and makes it so much more accessible and well paced. And if you're a fan of superheroes, it's so giving to superheroes because it's all about it's a world where it's literally reverse X-Men, where more regular people don't have powers.
Yeah.
And the main character of Izuku Midoriya is so you love seeing him succeed, and also has a great English dub. Yeah. That's one I'd recommend. I got a couple other ones.
Okay,
but
I think to advocate for Naruto for a second. I think if you're a person who
it's not a hot take, by the way.
No, I know. If you're a person, I think it's one of the most popular ones in the world.
I mean,
it's been the longest running for forever.
Bleach, and One Piece. I mean, you kind of.
I think the reason Naruto
they're on Mount Rushmore.
The reason Naruto works, I think, is because as the show goes on and you learn more about these characters, you learn more about Kakashi and Jiraiya and stuff, and the world they live through. It's like a game. It's like a Game of Thrones thing where you learn about these ancient wars and like the people that didn't make it through, and like I don't know if you've had the spoiler ruined of like Naruto, who his dad is very satisfying. And when I ended up watching, I figured out who it was like a few episodes before it actually happened. But when it actually happened, I cried because I was like, oh, he's deserved to meet his dad for forever, or to meet his parents and stuff. And I was like, if you like shows that build characters and build character depth and great relationships, on top of have great action sequences, and it's not just about, there is the theme of training and build yourself up, but there's also a great theme of an older generation passing a torch to new people who will one day do what they do.
And I feel like that's kind of going on with the ongoing Boruto, which is kind of a lighter, softer of the next generation.
Haven't seen it. I still have to finish the last 40 episodes of Naruto. I'm not even kidding. But and even like the loves that they lost, and like Kakashi's past, and characters that you like, it has a cast of 100+ characters, and it somehow balances them all beautifully. And I'm not gonna lie and say I never skipped an episode, but I will say, for a cast of that many characters, from Shikamaru to his dad to Gaara to like all these people, I go like, for a cast of characters that thick, it balances them all beautifully. And that
They have
has
a lot
to
of
mean
time
something.
to do it too.
That too. I'll get through the rest of mine and let you have yours.
So-
I think one anime that I loved, it's a little dated, but would make a killer fucking movie, Guyver. And it already has
one.
It has one.
With Mark Hamill.
No, but it needs
It needs an
a
update.
hard R
Yeah, it needs-
sci-fi
yeah.
horror Power Ranger
I would dig on
movie.
that.
Yeah.
I would dig on that because
I remember
that's
loving
a classic
that.
OVA late '80s. That golden period of anime
Yes.
where Japan had
I
all
watched
this
it-
money from VCR sales and Sony, and they were able to create the OVA, where the original video animation, where you see some of the greatest animation in world history going on at that time. Not counting, Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki's film work, but that late 80s golden era of studio animation is so slick. It's created a whole aesthetic. Like it's so I love it. It's so good.
After watching like some movies, particularly movies like Upgrade or something.
Yeah.
I go like Guyver would work as a movie, especially like just kicking ass, taking names, and like the horror element,
Body horror,
yes,
and everything.
Like that's one thing. The original one, like the transformation to Guyver, even for its time, I was like, it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
and you don't like it.
It's like a subversion of Ultraman or a subversion of the Super Sentai series, where obviously Power Rangers is based on those shows, but that's a huge thing in Japan. It has been for many years. We're transforming into our warrior, but in Guyver, it's just a horrible.
It's a horrible
it's like
thing.
It's a Cronenberg-esque.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think something like that, after watching like how a movie like The Invisible Man did so well and how much I liked that, like I would kill, and like the action sequence, I don't know if you saw that. If you get a chance to watch that, watch it.
I need to.
There's an invisible action sequence in a hallway where the Invisible Man is killing some cops and it's real bad. It's pretty intense. And I'm like, a Guyver movie, but with just a little bit of that of like the Power Rangers sprinkling on it. I would buy it.
That subversion that's something anime does very well, is subversion.
Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me so I'm going to name a couple of series. I'm going to
Yeah,
go
you go
three
ahead. It's your
series
turn.
real quick. These are one's kind of an older one. One's more recent, or a couple are more recent. So you brought that up. They just did on Netflix a couple years ago, Devilman Crybaby, based on the Go Nagai manga series, which has been around for
I
almost.
thought you said Devil May Cry, and I was like, I know that video
It sounds
game.
like that. Devilman is kind of in that same range.
Oh, I remember Devil Man.
Yeah,
I remember isn't there like the really gruesome scene where he rips a girl's breasts off?
A demon.
I
Yeah.
saw it in like the most violent anime on YouTube, and I was like, I watched all of it. I was like, some of these are horrifying.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Devilman is a classic one of that, and they just recently did one called Devilman Crybaby, which is just an adaptation of the classic novel, of the graphic novel, which the original manga came out in like the 70s. Like Go Nagai's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
And this most recent one, talk about stylization. It is so strange and so surreal and so quirky and inspired by so many points of view. I can't remember the director's name right now, but it's worth checking out. It's a very disturbing, stylized take on the end of the world. Essentially, it's if you liked Castlevania, you should check out Devilman Crybaby.
Okay.
But it is very weird, and I love that.
How does he become Devil Man? Is he bitten by something, or is he just a demon man?
He's been possessed by the demon Ammon, and he is coaxed into that by his friend, who is kind of the devil, the Satan, Lucifer. Into essentially, it's a lot of coaxing the world into apocalypse and into the biblical revelation.
I can dig that.
Wars happen all over. It's very violent. It's very tragic, and that story has been told many decades over by many different animators. But Devilman himself is kind of like this hero, villain, anti-hero kind of character who like eventually like roams wastelands and things like that after the initial story.
That's cool.
The same animator has recently made a series much lighter and much nicer. You can find it on Crunchyroll, called Keep Your Hands Off Aizukine. And it is a love letter to anime itself. 3 high school girls live in this kind of pseudo-futuristic world, and there's this beautiful moment at the beginning where one is younger and she's like, her parents go off somewhere and she's like, you put this TV movie on, and she puts it on, and it's a very Miyazaki-esque kind of film, and you watch her just fall in love with it, and she's like, I want to make this it's kind of the moment when I was a kid and I saw Princess Mononoke for the first time. I had the same reaction.
She wants to make like an anime, or
she wants
like
to make anime. And so cut to the future. They're like juniors, and 3 of them get together. One's kind of this. They all have these very unique styles. One's like, oh, I know how to do this, and I know this, and the other one's like this super tall, gawky girl is just like, I'm just in it for the money. And they essentially form a club and get around all these things. And as they are describing all their animation, everything, it comes to life around them. So they're like, oh no, this flying ship won't work because it doesn't have these wings. You have to draw these wings on it. And so they're building the internal logic. It's so playful, and all the sound effects are done by voice acting. So it's like if someone's on an elevator, someone's going beep, ding, bop, and someone runs around. It's like the wings are like, pop, 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 pop. So funny, so lovable. It is a love letter to animations by the same people and the same director who did Devilman. Keep your hands off Aizukine. That's a big recommendation. Another one that's on Netflix right now is getting a lot of popularity. It's Beastars.
I've seen that. I haven't watched it though.
Beastars is, in the broadest terms, kind of over discussed like this. You take Zootopia, set it in a Japanese high school murder mystery drama romance. It is a world where carnivores and herbivores live a very delicate balance. The powers that be keep everything down, but a student at this school who is a llama, I think, or something, is horribly murdered and by a carnivore, and they don't know who did it. And the story follows the gawky, strange outsider Wolf Lugosi, who is a drama student. He's like works the backgrounds and everything, and it follows him in this world as he develops this relationship with this rabbit and everything. And he also gets involved with like the Yakuza essentially. And so what starts off as a murder mystery is a framing story to show all these characters and this internal
That sounds like
drama.
It would be really fun.
It is.
And slightly funny in a way.
And it's done in CGI animation. And the way they were able to do it is, again, the Japanese voice acting and performances are so good because they were able to act out in full 3D. So they didn't have to stand at a studio. Like, they did a lot of the scenes face to face. And then they didn't do mocap or anything like that, or rotoscoping. It was all animated post-production.
Yeah.
But they're
allowed to talk with the other actor
Yes.
that they're supposed to be in the scene with. Yeah.
And you can feel it. And it is humorous. But it is definitely a more mature drama with a lot of undertones of racism, a lot of undertones of class and things like that, while being a lot of fun. It's worth checking out. Last recommendation I have.
One that you think should be a movie. Don't forget about that one.
Well, this one might work.
Yours. I mean, I have expected you to be like, just do Gundam. But all right.
We could do a whole episode on that. I won't even.
Well,
I won't bring up Gundam.
They might be
running
doing
out of time because I could talk about that for a while. Crunchyroll's YouTube page. The guy who runs that, who's a really enjoyable person, put out a timeline about an hour-long video, a very entertaining hour-long video on the multiple timelines in history of Gundam anime. That's all you need to check out. It talks about everything, the difference between the Universal Century, the After Colony Century, where Gundam Wing is based in, and like, where do all these timelines work? What are they all about? And where are we at right now?
Yeah. It's really a shame they never cross over.
They
need an Avengers-style Kevin Feige to be like, we need to.
There's a series called Turn A Gundam that is supposed to be the correct universe where all these universes collide in a kind of strange way, but it's not quite what you think.
Okay,
it's I've not watched it, but it's a very interesting. Check out Turn A Gundam.
What would your movie recommendation be? Like one that just needs the big budget screen adaptation, or maybe not even like a big budget one, but just like should be a movie.
No, I don't want any. I'm looking forward to the Cowboy Bebop series because it's got a lot of good people behind it. Obviously, that's going to take some time. John Cho was injured, and they had to put a lot of the production on hold. I'm looking forward to that because Cowboy Bebop is just a world I want to see more of.
Yeah.
A lot of people I know are like, no, don't touch it and everything. I'm like, well, the story of Bebop is something I don't care about. the characters and the setting are what I love about that show.
And also, like, what's gonna happen if they make it? Is your Blu-ray gonna vanish off?
Yeah, is it gonna disappear?
No,
is
like,
it gonna
it'll be
be like the Lucas? It's gonna be like the original cut is gone. No.
So you don't. There's no thing you think should be a movie immediately.
I would love for them to do this in an interesting way, but I feel like it's going to end up very similar to the Death Note thing. And it's just the last series I want to talk about. It's one that's popular, but more of a niche series. Is called Steins Gate. Steins Gate is based on a visual novel. It's a little more very much an anime. It's got all the anime tropes. It's a little more kind of in that it's not.
Is there training in there?
There's no training at all. It is a science fiction drama.
If there's no training. Get the fuck out of my face.
Yeah, no training. There's trial and error, and what it is it's about a strange group of friends, all kind of eccentric, who rally around this young guy who's a conspiracy theorist. He's a self-made scientist. He wears a lab coat everywhere, but he's just kind of a boisterous, loud conspiracy nut who has these delusions of grandeur. And so he's already a weird protagonist. And then he's got like his dorky, chubby hacker friend, and then the childhood female friend who kind of just ditzily follows him around everywhere. And they just have this club of like, I'm building inventions and everything. And he finds a woman murdered in this facility. And then he sees her later. And he discovers that there's this mathematical anomaly that has come about from the cell phone device he created that has allowed him to be able to go back in time. And so it becomes a time travel story where they're trying to like get back in time to save this girl from being murdered, and it succeeds. Then she joins the party. And she's an eccentric. Their relationship develops, and basically what they're doing is trying to get the right timeline made, because every time it works, there's a consequence. Yeah. Someone gets killed, someone goes to jail, something doesn't work. And so this main character it's got a lot of comedy, but in the end, it's this really moving, well thought out science fiction drama about trying to get the right timeline.
They have like a big chalkboard with like, if you do these choices, doesn't work. Scratch it out.
But what it does so well is it presents all these very strange alternative timelines, all these very interesting, weird character developments, and all this tragedy that he's trying to avoid. And this character who's just kind of this Slavic otaku dork develops into this man who's trying to be better. Nice. It's one of the best series I've seen in a while. Steins Gate. There's also a follow-up sequel that's not very good. The original is just fine. I think that would make a good movie. You could, if you did an American sort of thing, and it's just literally about a group of science, like a group of like STEM science nerd otaku guys hanging out, and they discover time travel, and they discover the consequences of it, and it's done with an emotional bend to it. You could do something like that. I don't know about any. If I wanted to see a live action anime, I want them to do something that is very firmly set in the style of anime, with that style very strong, like Speed Racer.
Oh, are you serious?
Or like Scott Pilgrim.
I like Speed Racer.
Like I want that, because you have to reference the style. If it's just dry and you're just setting on the story, that doesn't always work. Anime is a style. It has energy. It has a pace. It has a look. It has an aesthetic. The best way to do an adaptation of that is to do it firmly in the style. That's why something like Scott Pilgrim works, because Brian Lee O'Malley was already inspired by manga to do the series. When Edgar Wright did the film, he just borrowed into that, and it works so well, both for comedy and action. But the Wachowskis did the same for Speed Racer. They looked at what that's, and because they did the same with The Matrix.
That's
the Matrix
true,
is
but both
very
of those
anime
things
inspired.
both of those things are also much like it's anime inspired.
It's anime
but The Matrix
inspired.
Is a better movie than
Speed
Racer or even in Scott Pilgrim, in my opinion. But
that's
I would say if you're gonna do like both of those things are somewhat lighthearted. Like Speed Racer, I'm never like, this is so serious and dramatic. No, it's not. But if you did something like a Guyver or a Full Metal Alchemist or even a Gundam Wing, I would be like, I think you would need to ground it a little bit to make me believe those stakes. Because Speed Racer, I kind of watch it to just be like, I want to see some crazy lights and cars and explosions and weird stuff.
Which is, you're there for that.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, like I've thought a lot about a Gundam film and how that would work because they're talking about it. You know,
I'm writing one.
A script is being written by the writer of Saga. I can't recall his name at the moment.
Needs to hurry up.
Well, if it depends on how well Kong versus Godzilla will do, because it's Legendary Productions. Godzilla and the latest Godzilla and the latest King Kong didn't work box office hits. I think the Gundam movie will rely on how well this next movie does, depending on how much budget they want to put into it.
I think the first Godzilla and King Kong did well.
Right.
The last Godzilla
King of Monsters did not do it.
Did well. Okay.
So a lot of this movie will come from the fact if this one does well. If they do Gundam, we'll wrap it up here after this.
Yeah.
It should be set in the original 1979 series. At best, you got to cut a lot of stuff out or make it 2 movies.
Yeah.
When they're on Earth and when they go back into space. That original Mobile Suit Gundam series is very particular, very stylized, but also is a gritty war drama. But it's a gritty war drama where the villains wear like epaulets and like Char has a silver mask and everything. You got to ground it in a certain style. It needs to be stylistic in order to be successful, because I think if you make it too realistic, those like adaptation things don't work.
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh, the reason why he wears a mask is because he's got like scarring from an explosion.
No, he wears it because it's cool, baby.
He wears it because it's cool, and he's hiding his identity because he's having his own Count of Monte Cristo situation. He's going to murder these people because they killed his family.
What if they just did?
He wants to take back.
What if they just did the same way? Like every Gundam is a new take on Gundam.
If they want to do
what if they
new
just did like a new,
yeah,
kind of like how
if they want to do a new series, like a new movie, and it's just got all the elements, but it's a different timeline. Sure.
Yeah, like a Judge Dredd movie is not any comic book. It's just like, here are the kind of some characters that you know, and then here's a new movie. Kind of.
It all depends on how they do the style. I
think that's a great place to end it.
Yeah, that's because again, anime is not just a genre.
It is a style. It's
a style in itself.
So
and
saith,
it is an art in itself.
So saith the wise McGuire. This has been the Movie Date with Rob and Matt. Podcast people who like movies don't want to be too smug about it. Check us out on YouTube, our Facebook channel as well. The Podbean app should be caught up by the time you're listening to this as well, and hopefully we'll have them on iTunes by then as well.
That would be great. We're hoping to be on iTunes soon, so you can carry us around.
Yeah, carry us around in your pocket.
Available. Thank you for any last thoughts?
No, I'm good.
Thank you for listening to this little bonus episode. Again, stay well, stay safe.
Bye-bye.
See you later.